Sometimes with a bourbon or whiskey, it's nice to sit down with a good book. On today's special episode of What's on the Shelf Wednesday, we're going to talk about the new book from David Jennings, aka Rare Bird 101, who may be second only to the Russells in his wealth of knowledge when it comes to his favorite bourbon brand, Wild Turkey. Well, David decided to write a book about his favorite brand, and whether you're a seasoned bourbon sipper or just bourbon curious, American Spirit Wild Turkey Bourbon from Ripy to Russell is worth taking a closer look at. I'll also be sipping along with my favorite Wild Turkey expression that's usually available everywhere and on the shelf. It's Russell's Reserve Single Barrel. Wild Turkey bourbon fans from all walks of life that have an appreciation for the storied brand eventually come to know the website Rare Bird 101, created by David Jennings, whose love for Wild Turkey has produced some of the most comprehensive and detail-filled research that contains tasting notes, flavor profiles, history lessons, dusty turkey, modern turkey, warehouse locations, and much more. It's a treasure trove of information about the brand he says embodies the essence of America. First, let's talk about the outside of the book. Now, while I can appreciate the red and gold color combination, the classic and bold font, there's a part of me that wanted a big Wild Turkey on the front. I mean, like this guy, right? Maybe that would have been too much. I do know the book had plans for hardcover, which is a feature I think the book does deserve. But with COVID challenges happening, I think the hardcover couldn't happen, unfortunately. But maybe it's something we'll see down the line. But let's face it, the real beauty of the book is what's on the inside. So the book starts off with an introduction to the Ripy family, in particular James Ripy, a 19th century bourbon producer, who really, if not for him, we may have never tasted any Wild Turkey like we do today. From there, we learned about the partnership with the Austin Nichols and Company of Brooklyn, who was the world's largest grocery store from 1879 to 1923. You even learn how from that partnership, the Wild Turkey brand name was born. Now, as fascinating as that part of the brand history is, the book really captures your attention when we are introduced to Russell the Muscle, or as most know him, Jimmy Russell. American Spirit gives you an in-depth look at Jimmy, his hardworking nature, his family, and also learn what an amazing athlete he was, which I don't think a lot of people know. We learn of his wife, Jaretta, and how if not for their relationship, there probably would be no Wild Turkey as we know it today. We also learn how Jimmy Russell was mentored by legendary pre-Prohibition master distiller Bill Hughes, and from there the rest was history. Enter the new guy, Eddie Russell, still referred to this day as the new guy by his dad Jimmy. Eddie Russell, much like Jimmy, didn't really set out to be a master distiller. Eddie was a football star and one summer headed back home and decided to work at the distillery, where he would eventually help usher in a new transition for Wild Turkey and what was to come. All right, since we mentioned the Russells already, I'm gonna pour some Russell's Reserve Single Barrel. Now, if you guys had watched my top 5 available bourbons that I love, this is easily my number one. Well, not easily, I mean, close to it is probably Old Forester 1920, which is right up there with my favorites. But Russell's Reserve Single Barrel is probably my favorite Wild Turkey core expression. Now, this is aside from the picks, which can be amazing as well, but if I'm just looking for a turkey on the shelf, this is probably the one I reach for. You know, I do love 101 and I also do love Rare Breed as well, but this one being 110 proof, it's non-chill filtered. It's rumored to be around 8 years old. It's about 55 bucks, and it's probably my favorite turkey expression that I reach for all the time. But before we get into the whiskey, let's talk a little bit more about the book. So back to the Russells, and I think this is really where you can understand and feel David's admiration and respect for both Jimmy and Eddie. I've had the pleasure of speaking with David and having David live on this channel at times, and talking turkey is his passion. And even though he is writing down these stories and we get to read them, in a way you can hear David reading this to you in a way. When talking turkey, he's never forceful, demanding, or pretentious. He is matter-of-fact, passionate, and endearing. As the book moves on, one of my favorite parts was talking about the glut era in the 1980s and 90s when bourbon wasn't so popular anymore. When you get to hear about the Road Warriors, a parade of legends including Jimmy Russell, Booker No, Elmer T. Lee, and Parker Beam, hitting the road to essentially be the voices of bourbon and talk about what makes bourbon so special and unique. From there, we learn about all the amazing new expressions from Wild Turkey, and David provides a history of the development of each expression and also includes his personal tasting notes. He breaks down entry proofs, aging locations, flavor profiles throughout the history of Wild Turkey. Another thing that I think made this book so fun to read was the photography. The photography in the book was shot by Victor Sizemore. The photos help tell the story and contain photos of the Rippies, Russells, contemporary Wild Turkey bottlings, both foreign and domestic, decanters, much like this guy, memorabilia, and more. Each photograph of the whiskey makes you wish it was in your glass. Plus, with that type of photography in the book, it kind of brings you back to, if any of you have ever been to Kentucky or the Wild Turkey Distillery and you get to go into the distillery and experience the smells and the flavors and the history all around you, the photography in a way kind of helps you get back there. So two other sections in this book, which were great additions, I think, really took this book from a must-read for Wild Turkey fans to a must-read for all whiskey and bourbon fans. One is a cocktail section. David provides classic cocktail recipes, of course with the main ingredient being Wild Turkey that everyone can appreciate. Secondly was a section called Appendices, where David challenges and debunks the myths of Wild Turkey being for old men, frat boys, and roughnecks and bikers. It's a mystique Turkey I think still has to this day in some circles, but David addressed that as well. David profiles the casual drinker, the casual whiskey sipper, and whiskey enthusiast, and different distilleries and their core expressions, mainly helping any of those three types of whiskey drinkers find their perfect turkey with alternatives that can compare to some of the most sought-after expressions from Buffalo Trace, Jim Beam, Heaven Hill, and more. I think for David, aside from talking about the Russells, this is where his love for turkey gets to shine. As the bourbon world gets more allocated and limited expressions get harder to find or just go straight to the secondary market, Wild Turkey expressions always just seem to be there. I would put Wild Turkey 101, Russell's Reserve Single Barrel, Rare Breed against a lot of allocated expressions from other distilleries that make stuff less available. If I haven't convinced you to try anything Wild Turkey, David Jennings and this love letter to Wild Turkey certainly will. All right, so before we wrap up the review, let's talk about Russell's Reserve Single Barrel, which was my favorite core expression from Wild Turkey. Again, 110 proof, non-chill filtered, about 8 years old supposedly. Just a great expression here. Man, on the nose, it's pure turkey just elevated to the next level. It is tons and tons of vanilla and caramel, a little bit of maple syrup there. There's just full of butterscotch and honey as well. And there's also that quintessential citrus note that you get from Wild Turkey, that slightly higher rye mash bill really comes to play in the Russell Reserve Single Barrel, but it comes through more as like a spiced cake, like a spice cake that you would have in the fall with a lot of cinnamon and nutmeg, and then you throw some just rich, thick vanilla frosting on top. This particular single barrel is a little bit more honey and cinnamon forward. If you ever had like spiked honey or honey that's infused with a lot of cinnamon, that's totally what I'm getting on the nose here. Slight hint of chocolate too. All right, let's go for a sip. So for me here, yeah, the palate matches the nose, which is delicious. I mean, you get all that butterscotch, all that vanilla frosting up front. But yeah, the cinnamon and the honey really make an impact on this particular single barrel. Being non-chill filtered, you get just such a really beautiful mouth coating experience. It really sticks around the palate as well. I don't think there's a better single barrel on the market that's above 100 proof at this type of price point that you could find. And people that really want to chase Blanton's and people that want to chase Elmer T. Lee and Rock Hill Farms and all those, and those single barrels are really great in their own right. But the fact that they're really not available and also really priced high when you do find them, usually at a lot of places, it just gives you an appreciation much more for what this is. I have chosen Russell's Reserve Single Barrel in blinds all day long over Elmer T. Lee, Rock Hill Farms, and other expressions. Sometimes, you know, some of those good single barrels will overtake Russell's Reserve Single Barrel, but the fact of the matter is this is always available when those other ones I can only get maybe few and far between. Let's go for another sip. Man, I love the finish on this one. It really, I mean, all that butterscotch just really takes over on the back end. You get a slight little peppery note. The citrus hangs around, the cinnamon, the nutmeg, those baking spices, vanilla frosting. It's just an absolute hitter of a bottle that's always available. You know, this is What's on the Shelf Wednesday. These are usually available, always on the shelf. So if you haven't had a turkey product and maybe 101, a rare breed, scares you a little bit, I think Russell's Reserve will give you the opportunity to taste wild turkey in its truest form. Yeah, it's a little bit high. You're talking about 110 proof. If you're not used to that type of proof, you could throw some drops of water in there. It really does well with water, really opens up the sweetness. Just a great expression. Overall, American Spirit Wild Turkey Bourbon from Ripy to Russell is the result of passion, respect, and knowledge for wild turkey, much like the passion and hard work the Russells used to craft their iconic bourbon. To finally see it all culminate into this book for David as he transitions from wild turkey superfan to published author is probably the single greatest thing about this book. David has a way of telling you the story and history of wild turkey without it coming across overly pretentious or boring. Whether you're a wild turkey fan, a casual whiskey sipper, a bourbon historian, or just someone looking to learn more about wild turkey, this book has something for everyone, and it definitely solidifies wild turkey as one of, if not the ultimate American spirit. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this special episode of What's on the Shelf Wednesday as we looked at American Spirit Wild Turkey Bourbon from Ripy to Russell from David Jennings, aka Rare Bird 101, and also tasted through Russell's Reserve Single Barrel, one of the best available bourbons on the shelf today. If you're interested in buying a copy, head over to wildturkeybook.com to order your copy today. Learn a little bit more about David. Digital copies are also available through Apple Books and Amazon. The paperback goes for about 20 bucks and the book download is about 10 bucks. So with that, hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, hit the subscribe button below. Please hit that like button. If you haven't yet, find me on Instagram and find me on Twitter. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. So cheers and turkey strong, everybody. Take care.